I can feel very high.
It's a new day on the Enterprise and we're busy polluting space. It's for a good cause at least, as the satellites we've been launching help us keep in contact with home. Maybe we should have asked the locals before leaving our toys around, as a ship turns up and gives us a once-over. Trying to call them gets us nowhere, and it seems like whoever's watching isn't particularly interested in what they saw, as they bugger off shortly afterwards. Whoever they were, they have tech that prevented us from scanning them. Time to test out the new relay satellite by making a call to Earth. Archer decides to kill two birds with one stone and calls the parents of Reed. His birthday's coming up in a few days, and Archer says he wants to make a special dinner, which is a nice way of saying he'll get the chef to make a special dinner. Regardless, he needs to know Reed's favourite foods, and that's a problem. Reed's always had a tendency to keep to himself and not make a fuss, they say, so much so that even his mum and dad haven't got a clue what he'd want. Not the best of news, but Archer's the captain, which means difficult jobs can be foisted onto some other poor bastard. He appoints Hoshi as chief finding out what Reed likes to eat officer and tells her it's super important. She'll have to fit it in around today's plot, as the mystery ship is back. They're still not picking up the phone when we call, but I suppose scanning us is a response of sorts, and so is pooping some green before buggering off again. On the plus side, Reed was able to scan them when they dropped their shields to fire, and we now know there are over a dozen life signs aboard. On the minus side, they're entirely unknown, and the tech they're using is out of our league. Any fireworks would likely have bounced off their shields. A closer look at the damage inflicted has Archer reaching a conclusion: we're outgunned. Enterprise was supposed to have more weapons than just our fireworks, but leaving dock early meant they were never installed. He thinks we should rectify that back home before having another go. Both Reed and Tucker are in favour of extra guns, but against the idea of going to Jupiter to strap them on. They think we can do it ourselves, which makes you wonder why they didn't do just this at some point over the last few months, but let's ignore that for now. Archer's equally unconvinced, though sees no harm in letting them start the work. It'll give them all something to do on the way back home. Tucker and Reed are engaged in a bit of the old malicious compliance. Archer said they could start work on installing our new weapons, but he didn't say they couldn't finish it, so they've decided to go ahead and install the lot to prove a point. That'll mean some back-breaking labour for the work crews involved, not least of which because two of the three guns we're installing don't physically exist yet and need to be built from scratch. Difficult jobs are today's theme, as Hoshi's struggling with her assignment too. She's placed calls to a number of people who know Reed, and none of them can say what he likes to eat. T'Pol suggests going straight to the source and asking Reed himself. Offering to make him a meal as a way of finding out what he likes backfires, as he assumes the invitation was for other reasons and says it wouldn't be appropriate. It's so awkward that they probably welcome the attack afterwards so they can forget about it. Our mystery ship reappears and does a bit more pooping that buggers up a whole lot of things. They also manage to get our shuttle bay doors open somehow, so Archer legs it in that direction. On the way, he meets some aliens crouching over a couple of unconscious crew members and doing wibblies with their hands. Archer tries pooping a bit of red at them, and it doesn't do a bloody thing, but they leave anyway after taking the hint. A couple of crew give chase, only for the aliens to climb aboard their shuttle and sod off. So too does the larger ship after taking a few more shots at us. A check from Phlox tells us the two lads who are getting alien probed are alive but unresponsive. The ship's in an equally poor state, as those parting shots bollocksed up one of our warp engines, so we're not going anywhere soon. Under the circumstances, even Archer agrees it's probably time to see if there are any Vulcan ships who could come and give us a hand when Travis suggests it. A slight problem, though, nobody's picking up the phone. More accurately, our message isn't getting through, which is unsurprising when we learn the relay satellite we launched at the start of the show doesn't exist anymore. Reed's not happy with how slowly the work's going, and he's being a dick about it. Tucker calls him out on his behaviour, and when he finds Reed's trying to plug the weapons straight into our impulse engines to save time, completely shuts the idea down because of the danger. There's not much point in defending yourself if you kaboom the ship in the process. Archer is, if anything, even more cautious than Tucker. They're talking later, and Archer's blaming himself for bringing the Enterprise out before it was ready. It's Tucker's turn to argue in favor of risk by saying the launch was necessary to save a Klingon's life and stick one to the Vulcans, but he doesn't mention that. When Archer suggests that might not have been worth risking the entire crew, Tucker points out nobody's here because they want safety. They knew what they were getting themselves into, and that's the attitude which got our species into space in the first place. Looks like Tucker's managed to convince himself as well. When he sees Reed afterwards, and confirms that Reed's run enough simulations to be sure it won't immediately detonate, he says maybe we could try hooking our new weapons up to our engines after all, and see what happens. It's a couple of days later when everything's finished installing and is ready to be tested. Any upset Archer might have felt about Tucker and Reed being a tad underhanded is compensated by the chance to go and blow some shit up. It works a little better than intended, which is to say it completely fucks up the rock we'd planned on clipping. We blow a few fuses and T'Pol notes something screwy down in the shuttle bay. The screwy thing in question is a gift left for us by those alien dickheads. In addition to connecting with most of our systems to keep an eye on us, they also used it to overload our new toys just to prove they could. Archer's not impressed and kabooms the gizmo. Hopefully that's the only one. B-plot time, and Hoshi's asking Phlox if he's ever dined with Reed, after confirming those crew members are fine by the way, so that's nice I guess. Anywho, Phlox has eaten with Reed many times, so many in fact that he knows Reed will eat pretty much whatever's in front of him. Hoshi jokes about scanning his taste buds for clues, which gets Phlox thinking. Reed's got a number of allergies, but has been regularly medicated to tolerate a certain plant enzyme. It's one found in pineapple specifically, which has Hoshi conclude it must be his favourite. Phlox points out that it doesn't necessarily prove anything, but we've only got 6 minutes left in the episode, so it'll have to do. Speaking of which, we'd best wrap up the A-plot as well. Our mystery ship turns up again and, using recordings of Archer himself, cobbles together a message ordering us to surrender. Archer thinks that's a shit plan, so we poop some red at them instead. The good news is our new toys work. The bad news is they aren't powerful enough to do much beyond plink off the other ship's shields. If only there was some way we could juice them up, some sort of overload, for example, you know, like the one during the test. Tucker has an idea for how to minimize the damage we saw last time, so as the alternative is getting probed, we decide to risk it. This one does the job despite causing a few pops on our end, and the alien ship loses its shields. We fart some fireworks too, and after the resulting kabooms, they decide that maybe we aren't really worth the hassle after all. We're celebrating our victory in the armory, because getting wankered next to weapons of mass destruction is actually one of the less dangerous things that Starfleet does. Hoshi turns up with a box containing Reed's special meal, which appears to have been downgraded to a cake. Understandable, as we've all been a bit busy, but at least he's pleased at the pineapple filling, as it's his favourite, so we'll leave them all to dine on a disgustingly awful cake that's an abomination in the eyes of God, as we get ready to take another step on the long road. The carousel of introductions turns once more, and in so doing, Reed becomes the likely choice for our first entry in the Shit Parent Support Group Enterprise chapter. I don't think I imagined the tones of disapproval his dad makes in a call with his son's captain of all people, putting him firmly in arsehole territory. You'd think someone who proudly declares the Reed family have been Navy men for generations would have more respect for the chain of command. Tangentially, some viewers may recognize Reed's dad as Lieutenant Gruber from the World War II French resistance sitcom Allo Allo. Others may recognize his voice, as he's had a fair bit of VA work. If you've ever played Star Wars TIE Fighter, for example, he's the lad who provided your mission briefings. In fact, you could argue that Guy Siner here is a bit of minor sci-fi royalty. In addition to the above, and a Babylon 5 appearance, he was in the Doctor Who story Genesis of the Daleks, widely considered to be the strongest outing of the Tom Baker era, and generally viewed as one of the best Who stories of all time. We're not here to gush over the actors though, so let's refocus. We could probably point out that Reed's background as a stiff upper lipper is a stereotype, but as the Brit-in-chief on this channel, I can't say that I'm particularly bothered by it. The choice gives us a few benefits in this case, not least of which that the emotionally stunted and distant attitude of his father provides conflict in a franchise that's often largely devoid. I've been saying for a while that the more interesting characters in Trek tend to be the ones where things at home weren't exactly perfect. You just need to compare Harry Kim's happy family and Tom Paris's shit dad for proof. Learning this about Reed reframes some of the other nuggets we're given. We learn that he's largely neutral about food. Was that because he's genuinely not bothered, or did he learn to avoid the judgment of a father who considered him fussy or precious if his tastes diverged? We learn that he spent a week living on water and apple juice. Was that for reasons purely his own, or an attempt to prove himself to someone else? Could it even be connected to the previous point? We learn that he was a dick to another member of the crew while under pressure. Was that simply the strain of the situation, or is he trying to emulate a harsh and judgmental attitude that he grew up with, an attempt to convince himself it's normal rather than face the alternative? Those aren't the only potential connections either. His own parents are clear that they don't see much of their son or discuss his life with him, and that could also account for his lack of closeness to those around him on the ship. Speaking from experience, those two states are not unconnected. Maybe everything I've just said is all guff, of course, and I'm making connections that don't exist, but the point I made about imperfect lives giving us more interesting characters holds true even if I'm wrong. I've just spaffed out half a dozen paragraphs exploring possibilities based on the behavior of a minor character with only a handful of lines. The effects of parental figures on the main cast cannot be overstated, something we've seen time and time again. That's enough on Reed for now, so what about the rest? Well, I should probably mention what looks like a pretty egregious compositing error. In the scene where we find our crew being probed, this lad's foot is floating in front of the body he's supposed to be crouching over. You can trace the line of the body to see where it should be blocking the foot. Now, I don't like to knock such things when we're talking about visual effects from a quarter of a century ago, but this doesn't appear to be a tech issue. Other areas of those models are believably blocked by parts of the scenery, so it looks like someone just didn't mask the front of the foot. The rest of the scene works well enough, so I suspect it's just one of those oopsies that slips in every now and again. I wonder if it really was missed by everyone who saw the end result, or if there just wasn't the time or money to correct it once somebody noticed. Let's end with a closer look at those aliens, shall we? The Enterprise has bumped into yet another species several rungs above us on the technological ladder, and these ones were complete and utter dickbags. Or were they? I think it's fair to suggest they had the capability to destroy the Enterprise at any point in this story, and they certainly could have killed the two crew they probed, yet they chose not to do either. You could view that as a cautious approach, an attempt to gather sufficient data to be sure of things, or you could suggest that each escalation was a new attempt to get rid of us without just killing us all. That's not as far-fetched as it sounds when you examine the circumstances. We'd just placed a satellite in an area of space that was entirely new to us. Scans might have suggested there were no inhabited systems in the area, but we also know that doesn't prove anything after we learned our scanners don't penetrate their shields. Maybe there are billions of the buggers around the next star over, and we just took a big old shit in their backyard. Ultimately, we don't learn the motive behind the alien behavior, and this is one of those situations where the question is far more satisfying than any answer the writers could have given. Space is big, and there are things in it that we'll never understand. If that sounds somewhat hypocritical based on my harsh judgment of all the questions left by the last episode, I'd argue there's a very big difference between a mystery and a narrative void. End of episode.
Any luck recruiting this armory lad? What were his name again?
Reed, And yes, he's completely on board.
That were quick.
He didn't even wait for me to finish explaining before he signed up. All I had to tell him is that, under new leadership, he could take shots at things whenever he wants.
No, well, that's definitely not a cause for concern that'll come back to bite us in the ass.
I think we might have Tucker as well. I managed to catch him just as the happy juice was wearing off. He said he'd do whatever was necessary to bring balance or something, though he did keep calling me Yoda.
We're still leaning into the Star Wars thing then, are we? Only Disney can be a bit on the litigious side.
We're in the 22nd century now. It's all in the public domain.
Are you sure about this? Only I'm pretty certain that's not a sound legal argument.
Trust me, I know what I'm doing. In fact, we're introducing a new character this week. Say hello to Han Solo the Smuggler and Outlaw, who's going to be a regular guest from now on. Why don't you come on out and take a bow, and we'll tell everybody all about how you